right, good afternoon, everyone. Hope you all are having a great day today. So just as a reminder, we really only have a couple things today. Really only one main thing. Andrew and Ben are going to present in just a minute here. I do want to go through some brief announcements. This won't take very long. Just to remind everyone, the final homework assignment is due, I'm pretty sure it's due Sunday at midnight. It's due soon, so make sure that you turn it in. It's not anything too complicated or anything. It's writing a paragraph or so, kind of regarding some of the things we talked about in class. So certainly encourage you to submit that on time. But apart from that, I just want to give everyone a brief little update on next week's class. So if you look at the calendar, you notice that basically all next week you have work days. I will be inside of my office. If you would like to come visit my office, feel free. If you'd like to send me a message during my office hour or during this class and say, hey, we've got our whole group here, can you come down to whatever room? Feel free to do that as well. If you want to call me or chat with me or email me during that time especially, feel free. Apart from that, I want to make sure that everyone's doing a good job on the project. So if you have any questions about anything with the project, I'm happy to address that. Especially during those 3 days. But, apart from that, email anytime is certainly fine as well. Any questions before I pass it over to Andrew and Ben? All right, so just to remind everyone joining us via Teams, we certainly encourage you to participate. If you address their questions and feedback, you'll certainly get the 8 points on exam 3. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to the two of them to present.
You hear us?
Hello?
Yeah, we hear you.
Just so everything's good on the audio part.
I unfortunately don't have a webcam.
Yeah, that's all right. If one of you guys want to share the slides, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Okay. Ben, do you want to do that, or do you want me to?
Don't matter. I can do it.
Go ahead then. You're good.
Do what?
Go ahead then.
All right. Gotta figure out how.
And before we get started, do you guys have headphones you could wear? I think there's some feedback going on.
Yeah, I'm wearing headphones.
Let's see. I might. Here. You still hear it?
I think it's whenever someone else is talking. It just has some feedback. Another thing you can do if you don't have headphones is just mute yourself whenever you're not talking.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I can do that. All right. We good?
Can you see the slides?
Yeah, we can see them.
Cool.
All right, we're good to go. So we did chapter 10, which is on SQL, by myself, Andrew Hillenbrand, and my partner, Ben Sanders. The firm we chose would be IBM. It's an International Business Machines. They are the creator of SQL, and also SQL is used extensively in the business environment.
IBM, like you said, uses SQL extensively in a business environment, and they do so by using by using SQL's security measures such as grant and revoke in order to protect data. They use it to keep track of sales and items sold. They use the embedded SQL into other programs to create much more powerful programs by combining SQL with, say, Java. IBM also maintains the language, and they promote the language for the future by going hand in hand with maintaining, by testing and upkeep and maintenance. Information on the case. They use SQL, like I said, in order to keep up with sales and items. They could also use that to log employee information, such as their personal data, payroll, other things like that that a company or a business would need to keep track of their employees with. On top of that, they could use the same thing to log customer information, such as who they are, their sales records, uh, and things that a business like that a business would want to keep track of. And with SQL being created by IBM, this creates opportunities for the developers as well as the employees to maintain the language, keep up with it, and do some internal testing in a large business setting that couldn't really be done on a large global or international scale.
So we had a little bit of a tough time finding financial data for SQL for some reason. Not really sure why, but what we decided to throw down for this to, better explain it would be through SQL, a database can be created in order to track financial records and to produce certain calculations. And some of these calculations include the profit margins for the company and also the market, and then the debt to EV ratio, capital structures, industry average, and also return on the investment. But like I said, we're kind of having a tough time finding financial data for SQL. But let's see. That's all I have for you on financial data. The discussion we have for technological perspective, in your opinion, how would implying SQL better protect data?
And let me just remind everyone, if you're joining us via Teams, yeah, you've still got some feedback, Andrew. I appreciate it. Yeah, if you're joining us via Teams, if you participate by speaking, then you'll get 8 points on your exam. So if no one else wants to take it, I'll certainly jump in. SQL allows us to do a lot of things to protect our data. We talked in class about we can apply certain controls, we can give access, we can revoke access, but we're not limited to doing it to a single user at a time. If we're an organization of 300,000 employees, that's not uncommon for larger companies to have that many. We can do things like have role-based access control, where we have an employee inside of Active Directory, they're assigned to a certain group, and instead of giving it to one particular employee, we give it to a group. So we have a group maybe of accountants, we have a group of people in the finance department, we have a group of people in IT. They all need different types of information. We can go ahead and assign them that information on a group level instead of on an individual level. It's going to be a lot more efficient. It's going to allow us a lot more flexibility for how we use information, and it'll be a practical way to ensure the security of the data.
Another one, another one from the technological perspective is, in what ways could the implementation of SQL make the upkeep of data more complicated?
So I'll take this as well. It's all about the data model. If you have a data model inside of SQL and it's very complicated, then that's going to lead to complications. If we think back to if we have just one table inside of Excel, is that easier for one individual to maintain than, let's say that individual is a salesperson for a local bakery, for example? It's going to be a lot easier to pick up and understand putting information in one table than it is to put it in 5 or 6 different tables, even if that provides them with some advantages in terms of things like processing, could provide them advantages in terms of things like data storage cost. It really kind of does lead to some complication because you're having that information where you're having to do joins to get certain pieces of information, whereas you could just look at the row and you have all the information inside of a single table. So from that perspective, I would say it could make it more difficult, although in many cases it could be worth it when we're talking about a large scale.
Sorry. A discussion from a financials perspective. How could SQL change the effectiveness of keeping track of sales?
I'll take that one as well, I guess.
Tough
So when
crowd.
we're talking about, having large amounts of sales, if we're a small firm and we only have one sale a day, we don't need to use a database. But imagine we're a multinational firm. We have, millions of sales each day, millions of transactions. It's very important that we not maintain those using physical methods, using non-relational methods, because it'd be very difficult to then find information about our sales. We want to know how much of a product we sold. We can run a query and we can see the sales for that particular product. Whereas if we do that using other methods, it can certainly be more difficult to obtain. If we have paper records, for example, how do we determine how much of a particular product we sold? We look through each piece of paper and we tally it up. That's not practical to do on a large scale. So certainly, in terms of keeping track of sales, it's very easy to do with a database, not so easy with other methods.
I hate to jump back, but when we're talking about the upkeep of data more complicated, would you say, like, as our world moves forward, making technological advances, would you say that it gets more complicated or more simplified?
So, overall, let me just go ahead and mute you. Okay, there you go. Yeah, so overall, the data collection process will get more complicated as we get more data, but it will get less complicated in comparison to maybe using paper to keep track of things or not keeping track of things at all. The amount of data, in other words, will grow regardless of the method we're using, but that's actually beneficial because when we're talking about it at that scale, it's going to be simpler to maintain and simpler to run queries on, simpler to do whatever we need to do with the data at that level.
Gotcha. Thank you. I was just curious. So moving forward, a discussion for another financial perspective would be asking how could SQL potentially cost a company more money?
And let me just remind everyone, to get the bonus points today, you do need to unmute yourself and speak. So I'm certainly happy to address all the questions, but I'd certainly also like to hear from each of you. So I'd encourage you to do that.
All right, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I guess from my end, potentially this is a little bit of a stretch, but thinking about it, if you don't have the correct controls put in place for role and data access management, possibly a data leak from the database could cost them a lot of money if that occurs, because I know that that's really expensive for a company to kind of rehabilitate from something like that.
Right.
Yeah, so that's a great answer, William. Let me just jump in here and add that, when you're asking about when does something cost a company money, well, at the most basic level, anything a company does costs a company money. There's going to be inherent labor costs associated with things. There's going to be inherent electrical costs, lots of fixed costs. But, we're talking about SQL in particular. It takes a lot of time to be trained in how to use SQL. So that's one of the big upfront costs. Then you have to have equipment that supports running it. On a small scale, you probably don't need a whole lot, although it's best practice to use equipment that has things like redundant power supplies, error correcting memory. Certainly you want to put the data itself inside of redundant arrays. But that's stuff that you don't necessarily have to do on a very small scale. I would say you probably should, though. But each of those things, that costs money. The hardware to run it on. Potentially you could be getting software licenses that you have to have. Or maybe not even software license, but support contracts. Like I've said before, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to use software that you don't have a long-term support contract established for, because if something goes wrong, you could be on your own. And that's not a good place to be when you're talking about your company's most valuable data. So, from all those different perspectives, and there's many more that we could cover as well, we think about various costs associated with any product. We have some allocation of warehouse expense. We have some allocation of pretty much every expense, overhead. Each of these are things we would factor in. So it can be very costly, but the benefits can certainly outweigh those costs. I'm not saying they always do, but that's analysis we'd want to see is, do the benefits that this will provide us make more sense than the cost associated with implementation?
From a people perspective, how can SQL aid someone on a day-to-day basis?
So I'll take that one as well. We talk about a day-to-day basis. We're talking about, what does an employee do each day? Well, they show up, they do their work, and they go home. But if we think about, just kind of beyond looking past one person, we look at the organization. I think a better question would be, how can SQL aid an organization on a day-to-day basis? And there's a lot of ways it can. So we talk about, we have employees who are dedicated to finding information out for us. Maybe we want to find out which product should we cut. So we assign that task to someone. Well, if we have some idea of why we would cut a product or why we would not cut a product, that could be some sort of criteria. So maybe it's the amount of sales, maybe it's the amount of profit that it brings, maybe it is some other measure that we have all together. Well, if we have all of our data inside of a database, we can easily run one query and we can determine, in order that we want, which product is most profitable, for example. Select star from sales, where the sale exceeds whatever. We can do lots of different types of queries like that. Whereas if we're having to do this using paper, we're having to do this using non-relational databases, it can be a lot more complicated to run a basic query like that. So from an organization's perspective instead of an individual's perspective, I think that is a very beneficial thing.
The second discussion from a people perspective is, how could SQL be at a risk for acceptance by a majority population?
Okay, I'm not sure I understand exactly what this question is asking. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. So what trying to get across is, like, how could SQL be at risk for like acceptance within like a company, like from a person's perspective? Like, you go into a company, they have SQL they use for their database. What kind of problems could arise from that?
Just thinking about it off the bat, I guess from the standpoint, a little bit different from your question. If you have a company that has a different database and they're looking to transfer to that database, you got to think about a lot of the costs and a lot of the things that go hand in hand that are associated with training somebody to learn how the whole database works, how to interact with it and interface with it, as well as all of the applications. If you provide applications, you have to transfer all those over to the new database as well. But once you have a perspective of someone who's joining the company, I think the only risk for acceptance you would really be dealing with is just training them and making sure they understand everything before they can actually start taking on their job role.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, and I kind of adding to that, when we're talking about, something being accepted or not by employees, I think that there's, it all depends on how the organization is structured to answer this. I mean, if you have an organization where they vote on major projects, then you'd certainly factor that in more than if it's something where you have the majority of employees aren't even going to know this exists. I think that the latter is probably going to be more common in most organizations, where you don't necessarily know 100% of the software that a company has or uses, because it doesn't necessarily relate to your individual job. Just think about an organization like Mississippi State. We have roughly 25,000 students, roughly 2,500 employees. I don't know all the software that Mississippi State has. I certainly don't get a vote on it. But at the same time, there's certainly software that Mississippi State uses that maybe some people are not a fan of. I'm not going to mention anything too specific there. But, certainly when we think about that, it all depends on how the organization is structured and what level of involvement someone has with that structure.
That's all we got.
Does anyone else want to chime in on that, or that's our last slide on it?
All right, well, thanks for presenting, guys. We certainly do appreciate it. So that concludes basically everything in the class. We've covered chapters 1 through 10 now. We will have the exam on, let me see. So the final exam is actually open for a good many days. It's open from the 18th to the 24th of November. I will double check the academic calendar to make sure that nothing's changed since I made the schedule. Pretty sure it hasn't. So you'll be able to take that whenever you'd like during that window, of course. We will have a review on the 16th. That is a Monday before. I think the reading day is that Tuesday, the 17th. I'm not 100% sure on that. Basically, from this point, next week we're doing the project work days every day. I just kind of reiterate, I'll be upstairs in my office. If you want to come stop by with a quick question, feel free. You can also feel free to message me anytime from 11:30 to about 1:30. I will definitely be in my office. It's either my office hour or would-be lecture. So, if you want to have me come meet with your group, I'm certainly happy to do that. Again, I can also meet via Teams or, whatever. So certainly don't hesitate to reach out. I hope you all are making good progress with your projects. Apart from that, I want to wish everyone a happy Halloween. Hope you all have a great weekend, and I will see you all next class.